Jewish chosenness has a lot of misconceptions surrounding it. People don't like using the term sometimes. Non-Jews sometimes misconstrue it. People get uncomfortable. Well, chosen, does it mean chosen? Chosen for the mission of what? Of teaching the world that they are chosen by God for a mission. One of the most fascinating aspects about Judaism is the universalist stance that it takes regarding humanity and purpose. We are not insular. We don't believe that only we can go to heaven. Judaism does not actively seek converts. In fact, if somebody wants to convert, their motives are questioned and they're encouraged to maintain their current status. Why is that? Because Judaism believes that every individual has a unique mission in the world and a place in the world, and that the upright of all nations, the righteous of all nations, have a share in the world to come, that they are rewarded in the afterlife, and ultimately everyone is assessed according to their actions, their deeds, in relation to their environment and their challenges. Everyone's assessed based on the challenges that they were dealt, the hand that they were dealt in life, how you acted and reacted given those particular challenges. And so Jewish literature is replete with this sentiment, yet we would be able to even derive this from logic, because as the psalmist says, that God is just in all of his ways and benevolent in all of his deeds. Even if Jewish tradition didn't teach us that the righteous of all nations have a place in the world to come and everyone has a purpose in this world, we could derive it from logic, because God is benevolent to all of his creatures. In fact, when King Solomon in the book of Kings, chapter 8, is praying over the newly built temple, what does he pray? He says that it should be a place where the prayers of all people are received, Jews and non-Jews. And so we see that many righteous Gentiles, many righteous people today across the world believe in a creator. They believe in the divinity of Scripture. They act compassionately towards the Jewish people and have done great things for the entire world. Could it ever even occur to us that God would not reward these people, that God would not judge these people according to their deeds and give them a place in the world to come? God does not withhold reward from anyone. So again, even if it wasn't all across Jewish tradition, we would still kind of know based on logic, because God gives everyone according to their deeds. Now, insofar as humanity is concerned, the Torah tells us that humanity evolved in such a way by the design of the Creator in a variety of components, rather than one uniform, massive block, right, like avatar people, that each person, each nation has its role in this world. So, for example, within the Jewish community, you have responsibilities delineated to the Kohen, the priest, to the Levite, and to the Israelite. There are certain commandments that are relevant only towards kings, only for prophets, only for men, only for women, only for Jews, and only for non-Jews. Humanity is one functioning body with multiple parts, just like the human body. Just like the human body consists of multiple parts and organs, so too humanity all works together for one common function in different ways. So far, so good? So far, so good? Good. So we are taught that the prophets of Israel, the Medrash teaches that each of them had mercy upon the non-Jewish nations as well. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Isaiah are all said to have lamented the misfortune of non-Jewish societies. We are taught that the world reflects the original intent of its creator only when there is peace amongst its creatures. And so again, there is this sort of universalist ideology when it comes to Judaism. In fact, Rabbi Chaim Vital, one of the pillars of Lurianic Kabbalah, the main student of the Arizal, he taught that love of all people, Jewish and humanity at large, was one of the character traits that were necessary for a person to establish an attachment to God, one of the precursors for prophecy as well. In the Ethics of Our Fathers in Pirkei Avos, Rabbi Akiva says, "Beloved is mankind, for he was created in the image of God." And the commentaries make sure to specify this means all mankind. Everyone is created in the image of God. Any discrimination, Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik teaches that any discrimination between a human being for one reason or another, race, religion, whatever factor, constitutes loathsome barbarity. Because if everyone is created in the image of God, then everyone is worthy of respect. Everyone is worthy of dignity. And any distinction between Jew and non-Jew doesn't involve any sort of inferiority. It's based primarily on the unique and special burdens that were placed on the Jewish people. We have unique responsibilities, and just to maintain our distinction, that's why there's separation. But it has nothing to do with inferiority or anything like that. So the goal of creation is to make a dwelling place for God in the physical world, meaning that God creates this environment, this physical world, a physical universe, which seems to be devoid of Him. Right? You look around the world, sometimes you don't always see God in the open. So He creates this environment that seems to be devoid of Him, and human beings, through being able to see past the veil and look through the curtain and use their free choice to do what the Torah illuminates for us, we reveal godliness in the world. And so what a human being does is a human being helps that when godliness is revealed down here in this physical world, it's being revealed in the forum that was created to conceal godliness. And when we reveal godliness in the place that was created to conceal godliness, that's the greatest revelation of godliness that there could possibly be. That even in the place that was created to conceal it, reveals it. And so the 7 laws of Noah are our moral code to give to all of humanity, to civilize this world, to create the foundation of what a good and godly world would look like. And so they are not another religion. They are a framework for creating a better world, a better humanity based on the bonds that every human being has to enjoy with his creator, his or her creator. It's not enough that the majority of the world be settled with morality, not just that 90% of the world is moral. 100% of the world, even if a small area lacks morality, civilization, then Hashem's presence cannot be fully manifest. If the goal is that Hashem fully manifest in the world, then every corner of the world needs to be a good and godly place. We got a lot of work to do. And so the Jewish people have sort of a minimal role in this. Why? Because the primary role to create an upright civilization throughout the world is given to B'nai Noach, is given to humanity at large, because, as it turns out, settling the entire world requires a lot of people. And so the Jewish people's responsibility is in being a light, teaching the nations of the world that everyone collectively together can bring goodness and godliness to the world at large. Now, why was it that when God instituted a form of law to build civilization, that it was specifically 7 laws given to Noah? The way that it plays out is that God makes a covenant with Noah following the flood. Being that Noah is sort of like the new Adam, since we're starting from scratch again after the flood, God gives this covenant and says, all of your descendants are to make a civilized world. I don't want to have to destroy the world again. I'm not intending to destroy the world again. So that means that the world needs to be founded upon, establish a code of morality. And these 7 laws were the instructions to follow. 6 were originally given to Adam, and then the 7th was given to Noah. Right? And so since he was the new progenitor of mankind, the name takes on his namesake. But why 7 laws? So 7 is the most ubiquitous of numbers in the Torah. 7 is like the magic number. In fact, the Medrash says that kol shvin chavivin, all 7s are beloved. Because 7 in creation is the symbol of the pinnacle of the natural world. You want to know what the crux of the natural world is? It's represented in the number 7, right? It is where the 6 directions, right? North, east, west, and south, and front and back, or up and down, however you want to call it, the 6 directions are unified, are infused with the spark of holiness and completion. 7 is a magic number of completeness. That's why there are 7 days in a week. There are 7 notes on the music scale, right? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. And do's are the next octave, right? 7 days in a week, 7 notes on the music scale, 7 colors of the light spectrum and the rainbow, right? Roy G. Biv, everyone learned about that. 7 lands, right? Meaning 7 continents in the world. There are 7 seas in the world. This is why we find it all over the place. Likewise in the heavens, there are 7 objects in the solar system that you can see with the naked eye from Earth. There are 7 heavens described spiritually speaking. This is why there are 3 forefathers and 4 foremothers, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. 7. We come from, the foundation is 7. This is why there are 7 generations from Abraham to Moses, from the foundation of from Jews to the creation of the Jewish religion at Mount Sinai. This is why the land of Israel has to rest every 7 years, and why it's blessed by 7 fruits, 7 species, and why it was prior occupied by 7 Canaanite nations. It's why weddings are then celebrated by 7 days of feasting, and funerals are then followed by 7 days of mourning. Now, the fullness of 7 is actually realized also in the number 10. Number 10, like the 10 commandments, the 10 utterances which brought the world into existence, 10 represents the fullness of the earth as it connects with heaven. And so the fullness of the number 7 is actually represented in 10 times 7, which is 70, which is why there are 70 nations that are enumerated from Noah. And likewise, there are 70 languages that they communicate in. It's why there are 70 descendants of Jacob that go down into Egypt as progenitors of the Jewish people. And so these correspond to the 70 elders of the Sanhedrin, which would later interpret the 70 facets of the Torah. Getting the picture? So 7 is this magic number for the stability of civilization. The natural world is symbolized by the number 7. So hence, 7 Noahide laws to establish creation and perfection in this world. So far, so good? Yeah? All right. So the Talmud enumerates, it gives the Noahide laws, it's the first to describe them as the Noahide code. And so what that means, it teaches, the Gemara in Sanhedrin teaches that our rabbis taught 7 precepts were given to Noah for all mankind. Number 1 is to establish courts of law that uphold the other 6. Second, to refrain from blasphemy, from idolatry, from adultery, from murder, from stealing, and from eating the limb of a live animal, meaning being cruel to animals. So these 7 laws are the moral code which builds a moral civilization. And so the Talmud teaches that these laws are actually derived from a verse in Genesis. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 16, it says, regarding the tree of knowledge, it says, "And the Lord God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat." So each of the Hebrew words or phrases in that verse are hinting at one of the Noahide laws. And so, for example, established courts of justice is derived from, and it says, and the Lord God commanded. Why? Because command relates to justice and judgment. No blasphemy is hinted at from the words the Lord, which is used to refer to blasphemy in Leviticus 24:16. You get the point? We don't need to go through but each word or phrase in this verse alludes to one of the 7 laws. Now, each of these prohibitions, each of these laws is mentioned specifically elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, but as the Kuzari, one of the medieval philosophical works, points out, that the 7 laws, this verse is used as sort of like an aid to memory. It's like a mnemonic device to remember the 7 laws is from this verse. They're not actually derived from this verse, but it's a way to remember them. Okay? And so they are mentioned specifically in various places in the Torah. They're never called in the Torah text the Noahide laws or the Noahide code. However, they are alluded to multiple times. So, for example, in the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verses 8 through 17, which is when God is establishing the covenant with Noah, right, with the rainbow, and I'm never going to destroy the world again, it actually mentions the word bris, covenant, right? A covenant, how many times? 7 times, right? To symbolize that this covenant is premised on the number 7. And so the earliest sources to give a systematic treatment and describe the Noahide laws are in the Talmud. The earliest book of Halacha, which undertakes to delineate the 7 laws of Noah, is in the Tosefta, which is attributed to Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the 2nd century. So again, they've been called the Noahide laws. They've been referred to the Noahide laws for approximately 2,000 years, but the code has always existed from the beginning of time. This moral code that humanity needs to follow. And again, we can assume that by logic as well, because God, in fact, destroyed the world with a flood. Well, if he didn't give them a moral code to follow, how could he punish them? How could he say you did the wrong thing if there was no moral code to begin with? How could Cain be punished for killing his brother Abel if there was no moral code that the world was to live by? Right? Unless you delineate what the moral code is, you can't punish somebody for that. If there's no law, how can I be punished for breaking the law? So it makes logical sense that there was a moral structure, there was a moral code, and it's codified as the Noahide code. There's also spiritual compatibility in these 7 Noahide laws, which is really fascinating. And so again, seven laws of Noah. And what many of you who are the Kabbalists in the room, I see some Kabbalists in the room, understand that each person has 7 emotional attributes that how their soul relates to the world. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, right? Kindness, might, and mercy. Each one of those 7 attributes corresponds with one of the 7 laws of Noah. So, for example, chesed, kindness, love, right? What's a perversion of love? Adultery and all of these sexual sins that are prohibited by the Noahide laws. Gevura, right? The second of the spheros, which represents might, strength. What is a corruption of might? Murder, killing somebody, right? Overpowering them. Tiferes, beauty and balance. What disturbs beauty and balance is theft. It corresponds to the commandment of theft. Netzach, victory. Victory represents idolatry. Why? Because true faith is victory over all evil. Hoid, acknowledgement, represents the commandment against blasphemy. Why? Because blasphemy is a perversion of the soul's acknowledgement and expression of thanks to God. Right? Hoid means thanks. Blasphemy is the opposite of thanks. It's a corruption of acknowledgement. Yesod. Yesod means foundation. That corresponds with eating the limb of a living animal. Why? Because that was the only law that was given to Noah. The rest of the 6 were given to Adam. And since that was the law that was given to Noah, who was called a tzaddik, and tzaddik yisod olam, the tzaddik is the foundation of the world, it corresponds with the Kabbalistic trait of Yesod. And then Malchus, kingship, is referring to courts of justice. Why? Because that's the foundation of a kingship is courts of justice. So far, so good? Yeah? All right. Now, the Talmud, the Gemara in Chulin, teaches that there are actually 30 commandments, not 7, but 30 that are obligatory on non-Jews. But to clarify, the Sefer HaChinuch, the book of education, says that the 7 laws of Noah are actually more like 7 titles, 7 general highlights, like an index, more like bullet points, rather than the totality of all of the laws that need to be followed, right? And so the Rambam Mipano also explains that the 30 mitzvahs that are described in the Talmud are actually just subcategories of the 7. The 7 are the general categories, and that they contain within them subcategories to expand upon. So the binding nature of the Noahide laws is attested to by the many discussions amongst the medieval sages and the later sages, codified in numerous deliberations in the Code of Jewish Law, and its commentaries which assume, again, the Noahide laws as obligatory, that the non-Jews are, and humanity at large, is obligated to follow. Now, anything that's integral to building a moral civilization is automatically included in the Noahide laws. So again, even if it's not specified specifically as one of the 7, if it's part of building a moral civilization, it's included in the 7. And so that's why Sodom was destroyed. Why? Sodom was destroyed because they weren't supporting the poor, among other reasons, but because they weren't supporting the poor was the primary reason. Even though charity is not one of the 7 laws outright, because it's necessary for a civilization, for a moral civilization to exist, they were punished for it because it's included in the laws if it's part of a moral civilization. This is why, even though there's no specific 7 of the 7 laws to honor one's parents, this is why Ham, the son of Noah, was punished for dishonoring his father. Right? Again, even though it's not part of the actual 7, because it's part of developing a moral society, it's by default included in the 7. In fact, the Ramban, the famed medieval sage Nachmanides, says that all of the commandments of the Torah that are between ben Adam l'chavero, between people, are all included in the Noahide laws. Every single one, ben Adam l'chavero, between people, are all included in the Noahide law, under the laws of establishing courts of justice. Okay? And so, again, it's much broader than one might think. It's not just 7, sort of easy laws, passive laws. These are requirements that have tremendous detail and quite expansive in overall life. I want to talk to you a little bit about what it means that the Jewish people are the chosen people. Because in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 6, it describes the Jewish people in 2 unique ways. It calls us a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. What does it mean to be a kingdom of priests? It means that the commentaries say that, this is the Sepharno on that particular verse, it says, kingdom of priests means to teach the entire human race that all shall call in the name of God and serve him with one accord. In the same way that Abraham had his tent open to all people, every Jew is charged to go in the path of Abraham and teach morality, teach Torah, teach values, teach God to the nations of the world. Kingdom of priests means to the other nation. What does it mean, holy nation? Holy nation means in the same way that God is holy, is called holy, and he is eternal. The Jewish nation, which is called holy, is also eternal. Jewish chosenness has a lot of misconceptions surrounding it. People don't like using the term sometimes. Non-Jews sometimes misconstrue it. People get uncomfortable. Well, chosen, does it mean chosen? Chosen for the mission of what? Of teaching the world that they are chosen by God. Every human being was created with a purpose. Every nation was created with a purpose. It is the job of the Jewish nation that we are chosen to what? To teach every individual that they are chosen, that they are created in the divine image for a unique purpose. Jewish chosenness means teaching every human being on planet Earth that they're chosen by God for a mission. That's Jewish chosenness. In fact, Rabbi Emanuel Jacobowitz, one of the former chief rabbis of England, he said that every people, and in a more limited way, every individual, is chosen by God and destined for some distinct purpose. Everything is advanced into something destined by providence. He says that maybe the Greeks were chosen to bring art and philosophy to the world. Maybe the Romans for pioneering services in law and government. Maybe the British were chosen to bring a parliamentary system into the world. Maybe Americans were chosen for piloting democracy for the world. The Jewish people were chosen to be pioneers of religion and morality that was and is their eternal natural purpose. That is our national purpose, each of us, to teach, to be an example to the nations of the world of how to live a good and godly life. Now, one of the interesting things that you'll find is the 7 laws and Gentiles are not tangential to the world. In the book of Deuteronomy, it reiterates the 10 commandments. And so in chapter 5, verse 18, it says, God spoke to the entire assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire and in the cloud, the fire, and the opaque darkness. What does it say? With a great voice which did not cease. A great voice which did not cease. Now, why was that necessary? The Sifri says, what does it mean, a great voice that did not cease? It means that when God instructed the 10 commandments, the Sifri writes that it reverberated. The great voice continued to echo and rehash itself. It became subdivided and audible, reverberating into the 70 languages of humanity. So when God instructs the world, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that reverberated through the world in all 70 languages. Why was that necessary? To ensure that there's no misunderstanding as to the source of the 7 laws of Noah. That God intentionally made the voice at Mount Sinai reach all 70 languages in all 70 nations. Otherwise, a person could have mistakenly believed that the 7 laws are merely like a byproduct. They're a side dish and not central to Torah itself. And so therefore the words of Hashem conveying his essence, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, were emitted with such immense power that it did not cease, is what the verse says. It continued to reach every human being on planet Earth directly, subconsciously, infused in the fiber of the world, became the essence of God, translated and permeated in a way that everyone could relate to it. One of the things that's interesting is that if you look at the 10 commandments and you count up all of the letters of the 10 commandments, all of the letters equal 620 letters in the 10 commandments. And so it's interesting, right? 620 letters, which refers to what? 613 commandments given to the Jewish people, and, as the Baal HaTurim writes, 7 laws given to Noah. God is conveying his essence to the world. We are responsibility to teach it. They are responsible to learn it. But together, we bring about the glory of God. And in fact, the numeric value of 620 is the word keter, crown. Because Jews and righteous Gentiles together adorn the Almighty's crown of kingship over the entire world. We work at this together. So the question is, do Jews have an obligation to teach non-Jews Torah? So the Rambam seems to indicate that it's an actual obligation to teach non-Jews Torah. Again, Torah that's relevant to the observance of the 7 laws. The Rambam writes, right in Hilchos Malachim, in the laws of the kings, right before he discusses Mashiach, the laws of Mashiach, he writes as follows, that Moses only bequeathed the Torah and the commandments to Israel and to those who wish to convert to the Jewish people. However, those who do not wish to convert are not compelled to accept the Torah, right? Additionally, though, Moses commanded us by the word of Hashem to compel, uses the word compel, to compel the nations of the world to accept all commandments that were commanded to Noah. Now, the Rambam seems to take a proactive stance to compel, that we should take a proactive effort in doing this. Other Rishonim, most other medieval commentaries disagree and say, while it might be good form and a good idea, it's not an obligation. In other words, you're not sinning if you don't do that. But the Rambam seems to write that it's something that's compelled upon us. In fact, one of the interesting things you'll find in the Sefer Hasidim, which is another medieval work, it says that when a Noahide is sinning, if one can correct him, one should correct him. In the same way that God sent Jonah to Nineveh, a non-Jewish city, a non-Jewish place, to return to the path of God. So again, even those authorities who reject that it's an obligation still think that it's a meritorious thing to do, still think that it's a good thing, a good practice for the Jews to teach the nations of the world their code. However, throughout history, there is one modern authority that stands out as unique and advocates in a way that's completely different than what may have been understood by earlier authorities. The strongest case that a Jew is obligated to teach and persuade non-Jews to keep the 7 laws of Noah is the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe repeated numerous times that Jews in our day and age should be involved in this effort. Whether great scholars or laymen, community workers or simple laborers, since the Rambam identifies this as a commandment from God to Moses at Sinai, it's something we should all be involved with. And the Rebbe encouraged that they be taught, non-Jews be taught in sources that are related to their obligations, obviously, but again, specified that this is a very broad range of topics. For example, the Rebbe mentions Hilchos Deis, the Rambam's codification, the laws of character traits, which speak against the impropriety of anger. And so that would be, again, anything that's related to personal development, character development, is all encompassed in the 7 laws of Noah, because, again, it builds a moral society, a good society. So, again, the range is quite broad. It's actually said in the name of the Baal Shem Tov that when the sons of Noah, when the 7 Noahide laws were given to the descendants of Noah, that the souls of the Jewish people chimed in and they agreed to be the guarantors of their observance. The Rebbe also commented that in the famous meeting of the Baal Shem Tov, when the Baal Shem Tov spiritually ascended into the heavens and came to the chamber of Mashiach and asked him, Master, when are you coming? And the Mashiach answered, when your wellspring spread across the world. The Rebbe emphasized that your wellspring spreading across the world includes who? Includes to the nations of the world. So interestingly, and influencing Gentiles as well is something that's mentioned explicitly in a letter that the Alter Rebbe composed after his liberation on Yitzhak Kislev. The Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, was imprisoned for spreading Torah and, in particular, Hasidic tradition. And so when the Alter Rebbe came out, he penned a letter, and he writes in it 3 times that the ministers and nations of the world witnessed, upon his liberation, that they witnessed the miracles of God. And so the Rebbe points out that because the Alter Rebbe mentioned that 3 times in his letter, right, and 3 times establishes presumption, chazaka, in Judaism, that this is an eternal impact affecting all generations and all times and all places. In fact, the Rebbe said that Hasidic texts are mentioned are for non-Jews as well. In fact, the Rebbe mentioned that a person should strive to teach about the concept of the unity of God, the absolute unity of God, and said that this is contained in Shar HaYichud VeEmunah, one of the parts of the Tanya. And the Rebbe writes that this should be something that becomes famous among the Gentiles. In other words, everyone has to know about the glory and unity of God. And so the Rebbe encouraged teaching non-Jews about Mashiach. And I got to tell you, I know from personal experience that non-Jews are very much ready to hear Torah thoughts and hear from the Jewish nation what it is how to live a good and godly life. It says actually in the book of Zechariah, chapter 8, verse 23, that in those days, in the end times, that 10 people will come from all the nations of the world, and they'll hold on to the shirt, the tzitzis of a Jew, and say, "Come teach us, because we know that God is with you." It says it directly, that this is a precursor to Mashiach. And so the Rebbe asks, actually, why is it that the Rambam puts the Noahide laws, when he's codifying them, why does he put it in the laws just before Mashiach? The Rebbe writes that it's because the precursor, since Mashiach's mission is to unite the entire world, in the service of God, the precursor for Mashiach is the popularization as the teaching of the laws of Noah. And that's why he placed them right before Mashiach's coming in his codification. So far, so good? Make sense? Okay. And so the Rebbe utilized different opportunities in order to instill these teachings into secular society. So, for example, in 1962, the New York Board of Regents, the non-denominational prayer was determined to be unconstitutional. There used to be a non-denominational prayer in school. Maybe some of you remember it. That was said. It was deemed unconstitutional in 1962. And so the Rebbe strongly encouraged that this ruling be overturned, and stressed that this sort of prayer would be good for kids in school. In a letter that was written in November of 1962, 5 months after that ruling was announced, the Rebbe penned a list with multiple reasons as to why this non-denominational prayer should be said in school. One reason was because there are Jewish kids in public school, and this will give them the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of tefillah, of prayer every single day. And another reason that was listed was because of the fulfillment of the 7 laws of Noah. The 7 laws of Noah, which first and foremost is the belief in God. And eradicating the name of God from public schools was a blatant chilul Hashem. It was a disgrace, a desecration of God's name. It was only a bit later, 1980s, that the Rebbe, when things just weren't rye for having prayer, non-denominational prayer in school, that the Rebbe, for lack of a better term, conceded to the idea of a moment of silence rather to an active non-denominational prayer. But ultimately, that would be the ideal because it influences good not only for the Jewish students, but for all the students as well. Just to sort of bring everything together, even if it's not an actual obligation to teach the non-Jews proactively, it's something that is laudatory. It's something that everyone in our tradition says is a good thing to do. The Rambam says that it's obligatory. The Rebbe emphasizes this as well, but everyone agrees that it's laudatory. In Pirkei Avos, Rabbi Akiva says humanity is precious because we're created in the divine image. And the Tosfos Yom Tov over there says that Rabbi Akiva is speaking about the value of all people, and he wished to benefit all people, Jews and righteous Gentiles. Rabbi Akiva seeks to benefit the inhabitants of all mankind. There's an interesting vart by Rabbi Soloveitchik, who says, he asked the question, why is it that Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the holiest day of the year, the day where Jews of all stripes, no matter what you're doing the rest of the year, make their way somehow, some way to synagogue? He says in the afternoon of Yom Kippur, right, as we're nearing the pinnacle of Yom Kippur, what is the book that is read? Right, Sefer Yonah, the book of Jonah. The book of Jonah it's interesting because Jonah is sent to Nineveh. Nineveh was a very wicked place. It was the capital of Assyria, the country that would later besiege Jerusalem and exile the 10 tribes. A wicked place. Yet, Jonah was sent to Nineveh in order to bring people back. And so the Reb Soloveitchik asks the question, why is that story about sending Jonah to this non-Jewish town, non-Jewish place, why is that at the end of Yom Kippur? It's to remind the Jewish people that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, God's compassion embraces all of humanity. The most wicked of sinners who would later besiege Jerusalem are also at the mercy of God. God cares about every single human being. God sends a prophet to go warn them, to go bring them back. Everyone can return to God. The Kuzari indicates that the relationship between Jews and non-Jews is like the heart and the rest of the body. And so there are many, again, theological and halachic reasons why it's proper to teach non-Jews the laws and the ideas that are relevant to their lives. Together, Jews and righteous Gentiles fulfill the purpose of creation. I want to leave you with this thought, something fascinating. Okay, it's a fun numeric potion, I guess we call it. It's a fun numeric value. Our sages teach, right? The Mishnah teaches, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba, right? All the Jewish people have a share in the world to come. Well, that phrase adds up to the numeric value of 1,298, right? Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba. All the Jews have a portion in the world to come. The Rambam, in codifying his laws, also emphasizes that Chasidei Umas Ha'olam yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba. All the righteous of the nations of the world have a share in the world to come. So that phrase equals 1,403.